Good afternoon. My name is Elena Frolova, and I want to thank you for joining us in Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum. We're starting today's panel discussion dedicated to a very important issue, honoring of the memory of our fallen heroes. The war is on for the last 10 years, and the full-scale invasion is going on for a little bit less than 2 years, but for all this period we have not solved the problem with the burial of our heroes near Kyiv. The idea is being discussed to establish the National Military Cemetery, and within the last year there was an advance in this area. The parliament has adopted the law on creation of the National Military Cemetery in Bykivnia, where the heroes of the Russian-Ukrainian War will be buried. The solution was a compromise between the Cabinet of Ministers, the Kyiv State Administration, the Institute of National Remembrance, and the families of the fallen heroes. To outfit the cemetery, the funds were allocated from budget of 2023, and the first burials were about to start this fall already, but the construction of the memorial has never started so far. So today we want to discuss what's going on, what are the obstacles and how to overcome them to solve one of the key problems which is of concern to both the families and the society in general. The participants of our panel discussion are Vera Litvinenko, head of the Heartside Out NGO, Natalia Zaritska, chair of the Women of Steel NGO, Nela Shastun, Women of Steel, and Elena Tolkacheva, head of the patronage service of the Azov Brigade. Ms. Vera, can you please draw the overall picture, the path you walked, and what's really going on with the establishment of the cemetery? Good afternoon, dear audience. First of all, I would like to thank the Media Center for providing a platform to cover such a painful issue. My name is Vera Litvinenko. I am a mother of a hero, a call sign Vector, who within 7 years out of his 27 until his very death in Mariupol was defending Ukraine. He never found out what's the adult life, what is civil life. He didn't make it creating his own family. My son is still unburied. I was confident that our government will, our state will thank its heroes by honoring their memory at least. We've been waiting for more than a year. Our heroes have been waiting, the heroes that cannot be buried with honor, with proper respect, to bring the flowers to their graves, to bring the friends and brothers and aunts to their graves. The government promised us to create the National Military Cemetery to bury our heroes. We, with the families who lost their close ones, their dearest ones in Mariupol, were waiting for this decision, and we walked a long road, almost 1 year long, to make it happen. We were taking part in different meetings, discussions, panels, press conferences. We were offered as an alternative to Spivocha field for proper honoring of the memory of our heroes. We were offered the Lisa Mountain. It's 130 hectares in the Holosivsky district of the capital. That it was emphasized that it's close to the center of the city. It's a good place for burial, and it's close to the slopes of Dnipro. Half a year has passed in discussions, inspections, and promises. We were going there with the representatives of all the agencies who were involved in this matter, and we were considering different land plots near the exhibition center in Bykivnia, in Verkhovna cemetery. There were land plots outside of Kiev that were rejected by us immediately, and we were asking for a land plot inside Kiev. From the words of the specialists, the land plot in Bykivnia turned out to be non-problematic from all points of view. They were emphasizing it. It was a government property and it was corresponding to all the requirements. And the Ministry of the Veterans showed us a visualization. We went there to see the Bykivnia graves that was supposed to be bordering on the project, and the representatives of the Institute of National Remembrance, along with the Minister of Culture, assured us that it's a very convenient place, the one bordering with the Bykivniansky graves. It's something to remember our national memory, to honor our national memory. And Minister of Culture, Tkachenko, Yulia Laputina, Minister for Veterans Affairs, announced the land plot in Bykivnia as the best option of all available ones. And if the families agree, right now, like tomorrow, the works were about to start, and the first burials would start in autumn this year. That land plot was not accepted by all the families, but still we agreed to the compromise, given the first burials would start the soonest possible this year. The Kyiv Municipal Council on the 20th of April voted the allocation of 8 hectares of land that was a municipal property, and on those 8 hectares the construction should have started of the entrance memorial. The final word was after the parliament, who defined Bykivnia as the place of burial of heroes, and they voted the draft law 9240. But what we are having now, it's nothing. The construction has not started. The law was not signed by the president. In response to our letters, the last letter dates back 16th of June. It was registered with the office of the president, but we've got no response to that. 1 week ago, we found out that Bykivnia is too prestigious of a place for our sons. During the meeting with the families on the 2nd of August, the Ministry of Veterans and Mr. Karandiev, the acting Minister of Culture, decided probably to tease us. They gathered us for a meeting to offer a new location outside Kyiv, near the Southern Cemetery. Last year, that land plot was rejected as a problematic one. In response to the question why the president has not signed the law 9240, why and who rejected the project with Bykivnia, there was no argumented response to this question. What we've heard is that we've come there for hype. Now a representative of the Institute of the National Remembrance told us that the land plot in Bykivnia is too small. It's about 100 hectares, with an option of extension, and there is such an option available. So he told us that that district has a bad history, that the neighboring Bykivniansky graves is something harmful for the land plot in Bykivnia, and now we again are being promised to start the construction very quickly, to adopt a new law, to have it voted, to have it signed by the president, and everything should be happening very quickly. So in fact, we've been spat in our faces. We are forced to walk around the bureaucratic circles. We should await for the law to be voted, to be signed by the president, for relevant inspections to take place, and we are promised it would be happening very quickly, but we've heard it all already. We are the families of the fallen heroes. We see it as intentional lengthening, and not all of the families are ready to wait for so long. We've heard a lot of versions, a lot of rumors why is it happening this way, but me as a mother of a hero, as a citizen of a country my son sacrificed his life for, I don't want to find out what's behind such an attitude by the officials. Is it political reasons or a corruption component? I don't want the government officials to spit on our heroes and their deeds. The defenders of Mariupol we're talking about. They pulled a powerful army, powerful troop of the enemy on themselves. They gave the opportunity to regroup for other troops of Ukrainian army. Russia was targeting them with all types of weapons and ammunition from the air, from the ground, from the sea surface. The Russians sent their most powerful units at them that were prevailing them in 5 times in quantity. The enemy army was striking Mariupol garrison. And the Ukrainian army got this opportunity to hold the line, to win the Battle of Kharkiv using the sacrifice of our children. From the very first days of the war, our children were fighting, being encircled with minimal amount of water, food and ammunition. And in conditions like that, they were realizing, but still they were continuing to fight. Now us, the families of theirs, we speak on their behalf. We will not let their memory be smeared. Any government official who decides that the family of the fallen heroes can be treated like that we can be lied to, that we can be promised to and not to deliver on the promises, such people are not entitled to be in the government offices. I want to know the names of the government officials who rejected Bykivnia. What were the reasons for such rejection? I want to know the names and the positions of the people who decided to offer us a problematic land plot, which is worse by all indicators, which is outside Kyiv after 1 year of waiting. Many of us have the feeling that the memory of our sons, of their deeds, is to be forgotten. Someone doesn't want the society to see what was the price paid by Ukraine for every single piece of its land. The further it is from their deed, the more cynical is the attitude of the government officials. It seems like the government has lost the sense of reality and they're decided that we can be treated like this. We had a meeting in Maidan Nezalezhnosti on the 30th of June with the hope that we would be heard. There were a lot of journalists, including the foreign journalists. They couldn't believe that the families still have the ashes of their sons in their homes. They visited the homes of those families, and they've seen it with their own eyes. To summarize, I want to say that we, the families of the fallen heroes, I'm not only talking on behalf of myself, but on behalf of the hundreds of the families of defenders of Ukraine. So we see this situation as disrespect and neglect of the government officials towards us and our fallen sons. They wanted to tell us on the very last moment that our defenders are not worth the land plot, are not worth to be buried in the land plot inside Kyiv. So who has taken this decision not to fulfill the law? Why doesn't the president sign the law that was adopted by the constitutional majority? We want to get a transparent and public response to this. In brief, we demand immediate signing of the law 9240 and beginning of construction of National Military Cemetery in Bykivnia, as we were promised in the beginning of this spring. Thank you for your attention. Ms. Vera, it's a very complex topic, but may I ask you a couple of questions? Not all may understand the whole context. So for what I understand, the people can be buried here, the heroes can be buried there from all around Ukraine, not only those who were from Kyiv. Yes, obviously, that's a national military cemetery for all the warriors, for all the units. We have many families who left the temporary occupied territories. They've lost their family members in this law, and they've lost their homes too. So they don't have a place to bury their heroes. Unofficially, it was announced that there will be branches of this cemetery in regional centers, in regional capitals. So upon their discretion, the families could bury the heroes in their regions. And yet another important thing is that our defenders were fighting in the encircled city, and unfortunately the enemy changes bodies for bodies. They don't give away all of the bodies, and many of our families may not make it waiting for the bodies to be returned. So it was said that in the National Military Cemetery there will be a separate spot for such heroes. And eventually, if the bodies would be found, they could be buried in those locations, in those tombs. And in the regular cemeteries, it's impossible to make a burial without the body. Yes, obviously not. Thank you, Miss Natalia. You work a lot, like your organization was created to defend the interests of the warriors, those who are prisoners of war, those who perished, and you work a lot with the government on this issue and many others. There are bureaucratic mechanisms. So can you tell us how the interaction is going on? What is the problem, in your opinion? What is the problem with the interaction with the government? Because if the decision was adopted, all the phases of coordination were passed, something should have gone wrong at some point. Good afternoon. My name is Natalka Zarytska. I'm the head of the Council of the Mothers and Wives of the Defenders of Ukraine, Women of Steel. Unfortunately, our organization has a lot of members who lost their family members in this terrible war. The war for independence and freedom of Ukraine and Ukrainians as the nation. Today, I'm standing here in front of you on their behalf. During all the wars, in all times, the matter of honoring the memory of those who became a shield to defend their homeland and their people was a matter of honor. This is why, for me, as a citizen of my country, I feel ashamed about what's going on with the burial of the defenders of Ukraine. It's unclear to me why the agency, which is supposed to protect the rights of the families of the fallen heroes, plays an absurd struggle with them, representing the interests of some unknown persons against the interests of those whose interests they should be standing for. Why did the government, seeing all this absurd and disorder, instead of interfering and stopping this absurd, hides their heads in the sand as an ostrich? How come that during the year 10 of the war there is a tendency to act as if there were no losses? I want to tell all of you that humiliating the people who paid the highest price to make sure that Ukraine continues its fight, you're humiliating yourself, and you demonstrate your incapability to respond to the challenges of this day. The establishment of National Memorial Cemetery was actualized more than a year ago. There were multiple meetings, multiple working teams established, there were decisions taken, funds allocated, discussions were going on around the land plots to be allocated, and as Vera Litvinenko mentioned, there was a compromise achieved between the families of the heroes and the government and the civil society about the allocation of land plot in Bykivnia. On the 31st May 2022, the Parliament of Ukraine adopted a law on amendment of the laws of Ukraine of the National Military Memorial in Kyiv. On the 20th of April this year, the Municipal Council allocated a land plot for construction of the National Military Memorial Cemetery in Bykivnia in the Desnyansky district of Kyiv. However, since the beginning of August this year, upon the reasons unknown to us, the issue has stalled, and for the families who are unable to bury their family members within more than a year, the Minister for Veteran Affairs Laputina informed that the land plot for the construction of National Military Cemetery should be changed due to reasons unbeknownst to us, which means for us a repeated walking all this way of humiliation to force the authorized persons to do their job and to outfit the place where the fallen heroes would finally find their final rest. So what we're having for the time being, every day we're hearing about joining our forces, about the resilience, bravery, heroic deeds, but to tell the truth, we're all left on our own, and mothers whose sons have died, they are forced to beg for the piece of land in the cemetery to bury their sons, given they sacrificed their lives for Ukraine, for Ukrainian land. But every story has their point of non-return. So it's horrible to realize it, but we are coming almost to this point. Such attitude of the government to fundamental issues demoralizes us, and they destroy all our chances to stand at the joint front against the enemy. So I urge all the government officials, all the sane government officials, to interfere and stop this absurd dance on the bones. Thank you for your attention. Miss Natalia, can you please tell us, have you submitted the official letters, official inquiries to the government offices, and have you gotten any responses to clarify this situation? Miss Alina, thank you very much for your question. Here on this desk I'm having a folder of all those letters and responses. Obviously we've done so. Obviously we were getting those promises, And today, for an umpteenth time, we urge to fulfill, to deliver on their promises and to comply with the law of Ukraine. And are there any working teams established where you participate? Because it doesn't only relate to Kyiv, but to all of the families. For what I understand, the families from all around Ukraine are facing this problem. Yes, we are being engaged in such working groups, but it seems like a discussion between a deaf one and a blind one. So we're about to discuss something like problem of discussion of a law on prohibition to die in the war. We don't have a register, we don't have a law on the status of veterans, we don't have rehabilitation programs for the survivors, and we don't have a cemetery for those who sacrificed their life to defend Ukraine. This is where we are. Thank you. Miss Nella, many are already familiar with your story, but I would like to ask you to repeat it. You were a part of all those events, of all those circumstances. Maybe your personal perception will add some more pieces to this puzzle. Good afternoon, my name is Nelia Shestun. I'm a mother of two sons, the warriors of Azov Brigade. My elder son Igor died on the 1st of April 2022 defending the city of Mariupol. His body was put in a pit by civil citizens of Mariupol, and his body was covered with soil, with mud. The father of my sons, who remained in the city, initiated the exhumation of our son, and he refused him, telling that he's a fascist with the tattoos of Azov Brigade. I found the body of my son in a refrigerator in Bucha. On the 8th of June, I was taking a DNA sample, and when I found my son, the test sample was lost, and I was taking another sample, and I was waiting 3 more weeks to confirm 100% that that was my son. On the 25th of April, cremation has taken place, and the patronage service of Azov Brigade asked me whether I was going to bury that coffin with the ashes, or would I wait for the construction of the National Military Cemetery. I was lost those days. I didn't know what to do. My elder son has died, and the younger one was still taken prisoner of war by the Russians. So I've taken the urn with the ashes back to my home, but I cannot say that it's my home. It was a small room allocated by my sister in her home, and this is how I was living side by side with my son for not so long, because my psyche, it was not ready for that. And under the pressure of my family, we've buried my son. Thanks to the head of our community who allocated the land plot in that community, we've buried the receptacle with the ashes of my son right there. However, there are families who cannot even do that. The families are still in temporarily occupied territories. Some families are abroad. I was writing a different speech here, but the girls have already told you about the laws, about the dates that I wanted to mention, so I don't want to repeat that. What I will tell you is how in May in our family there was another death. One of our family members died under Bakhmut. His wife, starting from year 2018, they live in Poland. And that girl had to spend 1 month in Kyiv to go through all those tortures of our bureaucratic legislation to be able to carry that receptacle abroad. But I was here and she was living by my side, so imagine what is the number of the families who end up in the conditions like that, who don't have a place to stay in Ukraine because their homes are in temporarily occupied territories and they don't have a place to live in Ukraine and they don't have a time to wait to go through all those bureaucratic borders. And I have one single question to our government. Our heroes who sacrificed their lives for their people, for their homeland, who sacrificed the most precious that they had, who sacrificed the joy of their families, aren't they worth of respect? Aren't they worth of being honored? Aren't they worth to get a little piece of land in the country they were defending? Miss Nella, in case of construction of the National Military Cemetery, you plan to rebury your son, correct? Yes, I plan to rebury my son in the National Military Memorial Cemetery because I think that he deserves it. Do I understand it correctly that apart from the general outfitting there should be some honoring procedures established, some rituals that should systemically support the memory and the honor to the heroism of the fallen heroes with the society? Yes, right, because our next generation, which is growing now, which is about to be born, they are supposed to know their heroes, thanks to whom they can live in the free country, in the free homeland. Thank you. Miss Olena, I'm having a question to you. Azov Brigade is a force that has a public recognition, and through your authority you can influence some processes. Can you please tell us, for what I understand you are involved in the process of creation of this cemetery, so what's your vision of the process? What's your vision of how this situation can be solved now? Well, to solve the situation for the time being, what we're seeing, the attitude of the government to this issue, the fact that cannot find free time to sit and talk normally with the families to help them, even when we address people's deputies, prime minister, the working groups that are involved in this process, we still cannot see their normal participation. On 18th of July 1995, there was a burial of Patriarch Volodymyr in Sofievska Square. That was a historic event that was long forgotten by the government, and I want everybody in the government offices now, if they don't remember that, let them go online and read what was going on the 18th of July 1995 and make parallel, so they understand what they're pushing the families of the fallen heroes to. The Azov family is currently made of two big units. And we will never leave the parents of our fallen brothers in arms, and we will be with them until the very end. Thank you. Can you please tell us if you get other units involved? Because if we talk about the National Military Cemetery, we're talking about a wider crowd of the perished heroes from other units, other regiments, other brigades. Are the family members of other fallen heroes from other units taking part in this process in standing for the interests, I mean, from other agencies of security and defense forces? Yes, there are other families but who take part in this process, but such an organization is built around Azov family. There is no such phenomena, so we are moving this process. But again, I want to emphasize that we're fighting for all the fallen heroes of our country, not only the defenders of Mariupol, and it would be our pleasure to get all the families of the fallen heroes involved in our fight, all those who have problems with burial of ashes of their family members, or those who are less likely to receive the bodies of their family members back. I was just not thinking that we would be forced to fight for this. For me, what's going on now is a shock, absolute shock. I really cannot get relieved of this shock when we're talking about the honorable burial of our fallen heroes. I think that the construction of the National Military Memorial Cemetery should not be fought for by the families. It's the function of the state. The state is supposed to explain to the families what is the difference between regular burials and burials in the cemetery of such level. The difference is big. In accordance with the protocol, the top-level government officials who visit our countries, the foreign delegations, the President of Ukraine, as it was communicated to us by the Ministry for Veteran Affairs, they are supposed to come to honor the memory and to lay the flowers. So it's an honorable procedure. And for our warriors, not only the family members should bow in front of them, but also the representatives of the foreign countries. Our students are supposed to come there, the children with the excursions, and the cemetery of this level was something we were promised. So this difference should be communicated by the government. Second, when the families don't have bodies of the fallen heroes, they would be able to get a spot there and to honor the memory of their heroes. And third, there is no free space in the cemeteries of Kyiv. And when we see when our heroes are being buried near the fences, near the edges of the cemetery, well, it's painful. Thank you. Uh, so I would like to ask you how the burial of the fallen military is standardized. When Miss Nella was telling about this case, when the family residing abroad cannot take their ashes from Ukraine, are there any laws which are being currently amended, or is this law that we're talking about, is it about to be amended? Can you answer this question, please? What I can tell you in this regard is that the draft law was developed to facilitate the procedures of allocation of the land plot for the National Military Memorial Cemetery, so it's constructed the soonest possible. Yes, Miss Natalia, I would like to stress on one painful nuance. Every day we're having a lot of messages, a lot of posts in the social media when people decry the graves of our heroes because there are Russian supported saboteurs, the Russian supporters. You know, there are cemeteries in the small cities, in the small communities. The flags are being stolen from those graves. The graves are being destroyed. And the National Memorial Cemetery would get us rid of this problem, because the families of the heroes should not be facing this vandalism and barbarity. So in your opinion, how to expedite the process now? What should the state do to make things move quickly? First of all, the law should be signed, and second, the construction works can start today. We see no obstacles. We don't see any reasonable obstacles. We are not being communicated about such obstacles. So we're talking about not changing the land plot and not to go through all this way of agreement of the legal aspects. The law on Bykivnia should be signed, and the funds that were allocated from the budget should be used. Am I correct? Yes, absolutely correct. The law is adopted by the parliament. It's up to the president and to sign it, and the construction works can begin. And since today we are not being communicated the reasons why the government and the authorized persons decided to change the horses on the crossways, so today we are about to sign the letter with all the civil organizations involved in the process to demand the access to public information, and we will address all the stakeholders who are authorized to solve this problem. It's a problem made up by the authorized persons, by the authorized officials. We don't see reasonable obstacles to start the construction of the cemetery. Thank you very much. Let's proceed to the questions from the floor. Dear journalists, please introduce yourself. Ukrinform, Maria Kožuchar. I wanted to ask for details. How many requests, inquiries have you submitted, and how many responses did you get? We have a whole folder of the letters to the First Lady, to the Commissioner for Human Rights, to the Office of the President, People's Deputies, Ministry for Veterans Affairs. We were coordinating our actions. We have responses from everybody, but you know, they're just formal responses. And we've also addressed the municipality. We've only sent this letter to the office of the president, which was unresponded. So today we want to publicly urge the president and to forward this letter, so we cannot be answers that something was lost in the government offices. I know that the civil organization Hard Side Out has prepared a more intense campaign, so I want to give the floor to Ms. Liva. The last letter that was written to the office of the president, to the president of Ukraine, to the prime minister of Ukraine, to the minister for veteran affairs on the 16th of June it was sent out, and still there was no response. The only office we got a response from was from the Ministry for Veteran Affairs, and it was listing the work that was done until we wait for the law to be signed by the president. And in response to our question how to expedite the process, the president should sign the law when all the bureaucratic work is done. So the easiest way is to sign the law 9240. Now it has a different number as a law, and we should start the construction. The change of location with the promises of quick construction is unacceptable to us. We think that outside Kiev it's not honorable. And why do the government officials think that the heroes do not deserve to be buried within the city limits of Kiev? Do we have any more questions on the floor? Well, we don't have any more questions. I think that this topic is clear to everybody. As a citizen of Ukraine, on behalf of Ukraine, I want to say that the country, the people, they value what the heroes have done for us. I think that the society should get involved in solving this problem, unfortunately, but I want to wish you stay strong in this fight. I think many people will support you in this fight to honor the memory of the fallen heroes without the need to do all this difficult work. I also want to say that the families who lost their sons in this war, they don't have strength for this fight. We are the families of Mariupol defenders. Why have we ended up in a situation like this? Because our defenders were fighting in the completely encircled city, and for us it's impossible, it's unreal to get the open coffins, and this is why we agreed to cremation. And families who received their heroes in the coffins, they don't have life force, they don't have time to fight with the government for honorable burial. This is why they buried their heroes where they were allocated those land plots. And I want to urge you, dear journalists, you're a part of the government too, and the solution of this painful issue depends on you too. So please cover this problem the soonest possible. In the website of the Ministry for Veterans Affairs, I've seen the announcement about the experimental or civil discussion, public discussion about the experimental project of establishment of the National Memorial in Khatne. So we want to be heard. We don't represent only ourselves, we represent the civil organization, a lot of families. So please help us to be heard by the president. Please give publicity to this painful issue. And as another small remark, these experimental projects, so maybe it's no time for experiments on the families. You know, where there is a resistance of communities, some ecologists come up. You know, the war is going on. And if the full-scale invasion had not taught us anything, then it will. I want to thank everybody. I think we're wrapping up here. I hope that such public events will force people look at this problem under a different angle, will try to promote this issue, and I hope it will be solved. This problem will be solved soon. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you for holding on, and thank you for what you're doing. Thank you. I'm reminding you, you were with Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. Stay tuned. See you later.